So meet the beetles. Here they are. We've got rove beetles, very strong predators. We've got carabid beetles that eat worms, lepidopteran insects. And Carl used to have problems in the orchard with several lepidopterans or worms. Have you ever bitten into an apple and found a worm? This guy will eat them, so you don't have to find them. And then we have more than 15 different species of spiders already identified at Woodleaf. In fact, we have so many that I've been thinking about doing a pinup calendar with one spider per every month. And these beautiful wolf spiders are really strong worm predators as well. They eat almost everything, actually. And I can't quite reach, but way up there you can see that little jumping spider on the peach. They're eating thrips that was one of the last pests that we had to spray for, and now we're not. So these guys are really important. We also have predators and parasites that come and go a little more in the orchard, like another one of our syrphid flies down there, and these aptly named assassin bugs. And here's a predator. You can see that with our weekly monitoring, their populations are rising and falling. But look at this little peak here. This is a predator that nobody even talks about as a predator. Nobody even mentions them as being important in agricultural systems. But as we've monitored them, they come in early in the spring when our pluots are blooming and we have aphids in our pluots. These guys come in huge numbers, and when the aphids are gone, their populations kind of diminish, and they just sort of hang out and look for aphids. But if we ever need them, a few of them are still there, but others go on, and we don't know where. They just move to maybe another aphid system. So I've introduced you to some of our free ecosystem providers. Is what they're doing really working? How do we know? Well, we've looked at what Woodleaf has sprayed in terms of organic insecticides since the late 1990s. And as you can see, that in the late 1990s through the early 2000s, Carl sprayed for worms, particularly worm pests, but into the last years and all the way up to 2013, we stopped spraying hardly at all. Not very much. And then in 2014, we didn't spray at all. So are we stupid? Do you think it's a reasonable idea to rely on just those biological control organisms to provide habitat? I mean, to provide pest suppression for us? What do you think happened to our yields? Well, 2013 and 2014, the average clean fruit in the field was 90%. And in fact, last year, Carl, with great glee, told me it was his economically most lucrative year ever in the entire history of the farm. And we didn't spray a thing. However, everything is not rosy, as Carl said at Woodleaf. When you work with biology, the devil is always in the details. And we have a new pest, showed up in about 2008. That's Drosophila, which is a spotted winged Drosophila. And basically, we didn't spray for them last year, and we had a light crop of cherries, so we decided we could get away with it. But of that light crop, they took 30% of it. So we haven't figured out yet what to do, but we're watching the system closely, and we have faith. We'll see. So I showed you the habitat building. I showed you the biological control organisms, or some of them, that are involved. We saw that the spraying decreased and that we still had good yields. But most importantly, I want to point out that when you're dealing with an ecosystem, when you're trying to reattach to the web of nature, you can't have zero tolerance for weeds or zero tolerance for pests. So we figure, excuse me, I'm just going to take a sip and see if I can get rid of this. we figure we always are going to see about 10% damage in our system. And on my farm, I did similar things, relied on biological control, and 10% damage seemed to be pretty much in the range of what I would expect every year. So I've come to think of 10% damage every year as our tithing to nature so that we can rely or remain in the web of nature. And the glorious thing about that is that we set ourselves up then to reconnect in other ways, to reconnect back to the human community or our clients. So we get a very good price for our fruit. And it's really nice to be able to offer some imperfections. And as we accept imperfection, it gives our clients a chance to buy bargain basement prices for good organic fruit to maybe can with or make pies, or they just don't want to spend the money on the more expensive fruit. So do you see how reconnecting the threads to the web of nature brought us into an even bigger web, perhaps? So that's our farm plot. That's how we're weaving Woodleaf's web, from the birds on the ground, our wild turkeys, to bluebirds that are also eating worms that attack some of our crops, to the garter snake weaving its way through Brussels sprouts and eating aphids along the way, I might add, to all those spiders. There's another one of the pinup spiders, and even to tiny parasitic wasps that attack these green aphids and lay eggs, and then the eggs hatch and eat their ways outside from the inside out, like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and all that's left is a shell. These are all part of Woodleaf's web of nature that we're trying to reconnect to. And we don't have all the answers, but one thing we think may be a universal truth. When you kill something, you inherit its job. When you cut a thread in the web of nature, the web weakens and parts of it can collapse. So we're continuing to learn how to manage within nature's web at Woodleaf. And sometimes it's really easy. Sometimes you really just create habitat and they will come, like that swarm of honeybees that is swarming in one of our apple trees. But other times we have to work hard at understanding what is going on in the ecosystem, what are the ecological rules, and one of them is that biodiversity is messy. And so we have farmers that come and look at this in the summer and say, oh my God, I can't look, because clearly we do not have zero tolerance for what other people call weeds, would you say? And yet, see that curly dock in there? It's probably about 3 foot tall. But look closely. What's inside the seeds of that curly dock? Look, ladybugs. And there's that soldier beetle I was telling you about that's such a strong aphid predator. So what do you suppose they're doing in the middle of summer in the weeds in our undisturbed perennial living mulch? Well, I like to think that they're just there eating what's in the living mulch and waiting just in case we need them, in case we get an outbreak of insect pests in the orchard. If we had to, at that point, bring them in, there would be a lag time. But we never have a lag time. A problem starts, and sure, we're going to get a little bit of damage. How much are we probably going to get? 10%. And we'll accept it, won't we? Especially some of you guys that like to, there's people sitting right here up in front that buy the cheap fruit from us. I know who they are. So it's a matter of balancing everything, including ourselves and the ecosystem. So in our ecosystem. So our pollinators hate spraying. We have so many beautiful pollinators. We try not to spray very much. And in fact, that's one of the reasons in 2014 we decided we're just not going to spray at all. And then our resident predators and parasites, there's a parasitic wasp in the top left, and spiders, and everybody knows the red guy. They hate tillage and they hate mowing. So we try to do as little bit of tillage as possible, and we balance habitat building, soil building that Carl talked about, and economics. So over here is early in the spring, and we're moving more towards habitat building. You can see we've only mowed this little area around the sprinkler and let everything else bloom because, well, when the habitat gets too high for the sprinklers, that can be a problem.